What's happening, financial coaches? It's Pete here. Hey, I want to talk to you today about the problem of hard and fast rules. Now, in personal finance in general, there are lots of rules out there, rules of thumb, laws of the universe, whatever it might be. And, you have heard these. And I'm not here to say that they are particularly bad, but basically, I want to give you a couple warnings about them. So, you may have heard things like have $1,000 in savings, have 3 to 6 months in savings. You should be saving 10% of your income, whatever it might be. Your car should be retail value less than half of what your annual income is. There are all sorts of rules. Some of these are institutionalized, like your mortgage payment. If you apply for a mortgage, can't be more than 45% of your take-home pay. So there are a lot of different things. The industry makes some, the financial community makes some, and these are really kind of guidelines. I mean, they are all guidelines. There's no hard and fast rule about really anything, but I think a lot of us will see something, we'll see it again, it'll be repeated by a number of institutions, you'll see it written in many blogs, and it just becomes part of the landscape of personal finance, and we don't even question it, right? And so while I will talk in another video about why we should question pretty much everything, the problem of hard and fast rules is really twofold. One, these rules are usually made at the macro level. So if I say, hey, you should have $1,000 in savings, because at a macro, when we look at most people, usually the unexpected emergency is $400 to $500, right? Well, what does that have to do with someone at the micro, right? If they live in a rural area and they don't even own a car, right? They're not going to have a car repair. Or maybe they live in an urban area and don't have a car because they use public transportation. Well, they're not going to have a car repair, right? So what we have to do is remember that most of these rules or guidelines are made for the macro, at the high level, the averages, which sometimes apply to people, but oftentimes do not apply to the micro, to the actual individual, because of their unique circumstances, right? I kind of think about this in the prepping world, in the preparatory world for emergencies. A guy was talking about, hurricane preparedness. And if you try to prepare for a hurricane using the emergency preparedness standards that are provided by the government at ready.gov and some of these things, and I'm not poo-pooing any of that, but he says, if you're trying to have a flashlight and a face mask for smoke and blah, 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 he's like, you're going to be partially prepared for wildfire and partially prepared for flooding and partially prepared for earthquake, but you are not going to be at all adequately prepared for a hurricane. So why not, if you live in an area where your biggest risk is hurricanes, why not just prepare for hurricanes? Because you're probably not going to have a wildfire risk. You're probably not going to have an earthquake, those types of things. So prepare for what is your biggest risk. And what I would say here is it's kind of the same way in the hard and fast rules. If you're just trying to take these general macro rules and apply them themselves, well, then you'll be prepared for whatever the macro risk is that's going to affect everyone, but you might not be prepared for the risk that you actually have. And that's the point of financial coaching, is we're working one-on-one with people to help them figure out what's appropriate for them. So maybe they don't need $1,000 in emergency fund savings. Maybe they only need $300, right? Maybe that's not even near enough. Maybe they need $3,000 or $10,000. I'm just saying that the reality is using these rules and just throwing them out there and saying, hey, let's get you to $1,000 can be a problem, because it might just not be appropriate. Saving 10% of their income might not get them to their goals, depending on when they started, or depending on how much money they earn and what their retirement needs are, right? Saving 20% might not be enough. There are people out there saying 40, 50, 60 to 80% of their income, right? So to say that 10% is a good target savings, or 20% is a good target savings, might not be appropriate at all. It might be way too much. It might be way too little, right? The second piece of this is it might be deflating to throw out a rule that fits the macro that doesn't relate to them. To say, hey, you need to have $1 million in savings by the time you reach retirement, because a 4% distribution means that you're only going to have this much income for the remainder of your life, might just be deflating. I only make $21,000 a year as a household. There's no way, no matter how much I save, that even with a 6% growth rate, I won't make it, right? So some of these things, if you use the hard and fast rule that fits the macro, it just might take the wind out of the sails right away. So while we might have some of these in the back of our mind as we're working with people, we actually might say, hey, this is kind of a general guideline, but in your case, I think what makes you different is such and such, right? And we make it appropriate to them. That is the point of financial coaching one-on-one, is that we are supposed to help craft, we're supposed to help curate the information out there in a way that is appropriate for them. So the problem of hard and fast rules And using them and citing them too often is one, they are often inappropriate at the micro level, and two, that they can be deflating, demotivating for our individual clients. So keep those in mind. And that's why I don't really use a lot of them. I could go into a whole new series of videos about like why we have some of these and how archaic and antiquated they are and how inappropriate they are. And sometimes they're inappropriate because they are way too aggressive, and sometimes they're appropriate because they're inadequate. But in either way, if you really think about them, and we want to get into those, we'll be talking about those later. But hard and fast rules, I don't really cite them too often. I work with the client and let their needs drive what we're going to do. So hopefully that helps you later.